Hello, and welcome to the second of today's sessions on how to use the OpenGov tool. Just as a reminder, the City of Sausalito, this is a series of video recordings on how to use the OpenGov tool to learn more about the fiscal year 15-16 budget, which can be found by going to City of Sausalito, City Departments, Administration, Finance. The video recording series can be found by clicking on Budgets and click on Following the Money, which has the introduction in the first session. And by going back to Finance, we can get to the OpenGov site by clicking here, or you can download a user guide on how to use the OpenGov tool by clicking here. The easiest way to get to the OpenGov tool, though, is by bookmarking this URL, sausalitoca.opengov.com. When you first come to the OpenGov site as a first-time user, you will get this welcome splash screen, which highlights the basic functionality, reports, filters, how to export data, and the legend. Let's get started. In our previous session, we covered the annual view, and we covered the full functionality from how to look at the saved views, the frequently asked questions that you might have when you come to the site, to becoming a power user and looking at the filters and be able to drill down and look at expenses by department or revenues by department or by revenue type or by fund, or perhaps to look like revenues and expenses and changing it to a line graph so that you can see revenues and expenses for all funds or just governmental funds or just maybe the general fund. And as you'll recall, at any time you can hit reset to get back to the original view. For a full description of how to use the OpenGov site and all the power of the filters, please go look at lesson 1 of today's video session. The views we want to cover today are the rest of the reports, the other views. We'll start with balance sheet. Balance sheet is a assets equals liabilities and equities. And the frequently asked questions there are, what are the statement of assets? The most frequent question, of course, is how much cash does the city have and how is it allocated? Is it allocated by portfolio allocation? How is it allocated by fund? And we can drill down and see how much is in the governmental funds all the way down to how much is in the general fund. Another way of looking at it, though, is the save views. It's a statement of cash and investments for the governmental funds, for the enterprise funds, for the internal service funds. Other frequently asked questions are, what's the city's statement of long-term debt? And what are the statement of fund balance in the general fund? These are all save views that I've saved for you. And remember, at any point in time, each view, each visualization has a unique URL, which you can share by email by clicking that link. And of course, there are summary tables for each view, includes the dollar amounts, which can be downloaded into an Excel spreadsheet, or you can save the image and save the table. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out is there is a lot of data in all these views. You can see we have from 2003 to 2014. If you only wanted to look at several years, you can slide the bar. And of course, the data in the summary table also adjusts just to show that data. Or you hit reset at any time to get back to the original view. The next two views are how much spending or how much revenue has been collected by the city through the most current and recent month of the current fiscal year. This view, first one, budget to actual, is how much was spent cumulatively through March as compared to how much was spent cumulatively through March in all of the previous fiscal years. And then it compares that spending of March through the prorated budget. The prorated budget is simply 9 months divided by 12 months of the fiscal year. Oh, I know I said March, but we're on a fiscal year from July 1st to June 30. So we're 9 months into the current year budget. Same full functionality. You can click into the department, change the department to expense type, view down into professional services, see how much was spent for other professional services, and of course, view all the transactions that occurred within that uh, line item. So full functionality, view all the way down to the line item. The other budget to actual is the cumulative budget to actual for just the current fiscal year, how much was spent in July and August and September and October to get to today's position of how much was spent in March uh, versus the adopted budget. This view is just the general fund, yet if you wanted to expand the view to all funds, you just click there, and now you have how much was spent cumulatively in all funds. Data is able to be downloaded. And anytime you have help, there's a how-to screen, the welcome screen, the budget, and then there's a contact the City of Sausalito. If you want to contact me or anyone in the City of Sausalito with, I don't understand a particular view, just hit share, email. This URL then is copied and pasted in here. Send the email to me, and with your question, your comments, your observations, and we can follow up back with you. So that covers the budget to actual. So the annual view along the budget to actual views are the two most common views that are used for current information. The view that I want to spend a bit more time on today is the fiscal year 15-16 budget preparation view. So what we've done here is this is just the general fund, but again, you can expand it if you want. And we're looking at the prior 2-year actual data, the current adopted budget, and how much we estimate we're going to spend vis-a-vis the adopted budget for this fiscal year. And then this was the proposed budget in its first revision. This is the proposed budget after the department requests. And now we're going into Finance Committee meetings. Finance Committee reviews each of the department's budgets, asks key questions about levels of service. We analyze priority spending and look at capital projects. They also consider supplemental requests for levels of service, and then they finally come out with a recommended Finance Committee budget. As we go through the Finance Committee hearings and we revise the proposed budget for fiscal year 15-16, I will add a new column to the right of this column so that you can see the changes that have been made in any of the assumptions or any of the economic facts or any of the Finance Committee's recommendations that they're adding to. You know, in my previous sessions, I didn't cover that there are notes in this view. So you can see that we have notes that are attached to various items. And here we can see that Department of Engineering asked for a supplemental request of $5,000 for some miscellaneous promotions. There was a supplemental request, $150,000 for earthquake and flood insurance, and whether or not the city wants to have this kind of coverage. There's a note here for the police asking for a mobile force options training challenger or a part-time emergency services planner. So those amounts in the notes aren't in these amounts, but they're being considered by the Finance Committee. And then when the Finance Committee recommends, we will expand those notes to say what they recommended and what they didn't. So this is a page you'll want to come back to often during the budget development process. At the end of this video recording session, we will have a budget webinar. We'll use this to answer questions from the audience. 3 more quick views. There's a long-term financial plan, and what I would just like to point out really quick on the long-term financial plan, by looking at the financial plan by its different categories, and then you're able to change the view to stack graph, and clicking through, you're able to see what the assumptions were used to build out the revenue types, reset, look at expenses. And now you can look at all the assumptions that were used to change the different categories of expenditures in order to give us, and the best thing about this chart, hitting the reset, is this chart represents all of the efforts that the city undertook for the past 7 years to structurally balance the general fund going forward. Let's skip over transactions for a minute and go to the treasurer's report. Every month, the finance department meets with the finance committee, and one of the things we review is cash and their investments, so we can see how the cash has changed this year from July through March. And it's our monthly treasurer's report. Again, same full functionality of being able to look at it by assets, by funds, governmental funds, how much is in the general fund, and what transactions occurred. Lastly, the transactions report is the totality of all transactions that we can see in the bottom tab. And for example, you might want to ask a question like, how much does the city spend for hardware from Water Street hardware store? We can click on Water Street Company. Look, so for all the years in the database, which is 2002 through 2015, year to date, you see we spent $74,000 from Water Street, and we can look at that by which departments are buying from Water Street. You see maintenance has bought $49,000, recreation $5,000, sewer, etc. You may want to know how much are we buying from Water Street's competitor, Goodman. Here we spent $61,000 for Goodman Building Supply Company, or $50,000 just from Goodman Building Supply Company. And the departments that bought most from them were maintenance, non-departmental, sewer, engineering. Users may be interested in the total spending, how much was spent on each vendor through the year. So here is our top vendor that we've passed through money is to CalPERS, Alton Construction, etc. And of course, you can drill down and look at all the expenditures for each vendor that's in here. All revenues, all transactions, all debits and credits and closing journal entries are included in this transaction database. Well, that concludes the second of today's two sessions on how to use the OpenGov tool. This is a powerful tool. It can be used not just for transparency, but also for analytical purposes. And I encourage all of you to become super users. Please call me with your questions. The next session of OpenGov, of Following the Money, will be on where do the revenues come from. Thank you and goodbye.